Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be going over male poses with clothes, so let's just get right to it. I have my reference on my phone right here. This will be in the downloadable resources, so I will be, just referencing these things. So as you can see, I chose a standing pose, a more action-like pose, and a sitting pose. So of course use whatever kind of video that, use what kind of pose that you want, but I will just be starting with those since I feel like those are some good examples of different types of clothing as well as showing some muscle. So let's get started off with the top, with the left, all the way to the right, all the way to the left, and that is the standing pose. So all we really need to do is once again just draw in our proportions. So if you guys remember, we'll do a quick review. We'll have a cranium. We'll just start off with our head here. Actually, let me try and draw this a lot smaller so this can all fit, and I can just zoom in later. So I'm going to draw just the shape of the head. It doesn't have to be super accurate or anything, just enough that I can use it as a nice gauge. So I have the mask over on top and then the cross line. His neck seems to be going outward, so that is one hand length approximately from the nose down. Then we have our clavicle, and his arms actually, and his shoulders kind of look like they're going diagonally this way. So if you want to draw that, what we can do is we can first draw one box that is one hand length from each side. This will be a little bit shorter because it's more foreshortened. Then what we can do is we can just draw in two boxes. Make sure that if you look at his body, it's kind of going this way. So it's kind of like he's bending a little bit forward. So it looks like he's also tilting a little bit, so I'm not really going to make him tilt too much. I'm going to actually make him more like of a standstill. So anyways, we can go ahead and mark out his proportions. So we have halfway on this box, that'll be his pelvis. And then from here we have his clavicle. And we have his chest. So just that enough is good. And then we can go on with his arms, which you can just simplify with using sticks first. So make sure it's about the bottom of the rib cage here. It reaches about the bottom of the rib cage and then curls in. And then we have his hand. Then the other hand can swing from the navel. Here's the navel. We can swing that outward. And then from the pubic bone, we can swing that outward as well. And that'll be his arm and his hand. So now let's drag this down just a little bit. And then what we can do is we can add in his legs. So let's give his legs a more of a kind of like a leaning in hip feel. So what I mean by that is he's leaning on one side. And then he's resting his leg on the other side. So look like that. So look more, less tilted and just more standing straight. So here we have his kneecap. And let's extend this a little bit longer. Here we have his feet. Very, very simple. We can always fix this later on. So we have our body. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and, this looks a little bit crooked. Oh well, I'll just make it look like this for now. So what we can do is we can zoom in. And then we can add in some of our details. So what we can do is we can add our basic shapes now. What we can do is we can add in our cylinders or our rectangles if you want to go more flat. So make sure that when it comes to the forearm, it's thicker on the top and then thinner on the bottom. Here we have our shoulder, elbow, forearm. And here we have his neck, which will be kind of like a little trunk. His trapezius. That'll be the base of his body from the top. From the lower regions, what we can do is we can just draw in our basic shape of our legs. So keep them as little chicken legs if you want to call them that. I like to refer to them as that because they kind of do look like chicken legs, because they always go from they're always thick on the top and then thin at the bottom. So this is what I did for the lower area. So now that we have that set, we can go ahead and zoom out so we can see what this looks like. I'm tilting it just so it looks more straight. There. Oh, I'll just leave it at that. So this is what it looks like. In the picture, he actually is kind of more curved, but we'll stick with this for now. So then we can go ahead and start off with this clothing. If you want to add his clothing from the top, what we should do first is erase everything. Not everything entirely, but enough that, come on, I lost the picture for a second, but not enough that we can't see everything. So erase a good amount so that we can still see the drawing, the soft drawing underneath, but enough that that doesn't distract us. So in this case, I might have to correct a little bit of the tiltedness. So anyways, so it looks like he has some sunglasses on, but first let's just put in quickly the nose and then the chin. You don't need to draw the face too much right now. I'm just focusing on the clothing at the moment. So here we have his sunglasses, which one side is blocked, but then we have the other side, which is just two little squares. And then we have the bar, or the little piece where it hangs. That's how you want to draw just draw some sunglasses. And then if you want to draw a hoodie on top, just simply draw a cloth over and wrap it around the head. So that is our neck. And then when it comes to our body, what we can do now is we can just fix whatever thing that we want to fix. I'm going to alter his pose just a little bit so it's a little bit straighter and not super what's it called? Tilted. So here I'm just going to be editing his pose just a little bit, still making sure that I still have the original drawing so I don't mess up. So here for the lower legs this time, I'm actually going to spread them out a little bit so we can get some nice balance. So rather than just having them at a standstill on the same level, I'm going to spread this one out. I'm going to make this one straight. And this one was slightly bent. This is a pretty standard pose, but it's very effective because you have a little bit of that tilt. So if you want to draw clothes on top, kind of just base it off of your model pretty quickly. You want to notice that the collar around the jacket fits around his neck. Make sure you still have a little bit of an outline over the forms, just because you don't want it to be, seem like it's just sticking all the way to his skin, right? So you want to make sure that there is a good amount of space overlapping on top of the body. Same with the jacket, you don't want to stick it to the body, you want to just make sure it's draping over. Here's a seam line for the jacket. And here's his jacket, which is quite thick, so it covers a lot of his body. And then it flows down to his legs. And then it drapes over his body. Remember, it doesn't stick to it because it's a loose piece of clothing. It just drapes over. So a lot of this inner body part, you don't see it. But it's good to know where it's going. Here's a zipper, which you can indicate just by drawing a simple line or a little bar. And then if you notice that there's some folds draping over on his body, on his jacket, it's kind of like a zigzag pose, zigzag fold. So it looks like a big zigzag right down. And notice how the folds are always dripping down towards gravity, which is downward. And here is our arm, And here we see a bunch of zigzags here. So if you remember where you put your arm, it's somewhere around here. This is where the middle part of his forearm starts showing the folds. And then here we have the cuff, which we can shade in black. Then we can go in and do some more zigzag folds. So notice how because it's scrunched up here more, that's why there's more folds rather than up here. There's always going to be folds around the seam lines as well. So just overlap everything on top of the arm. So here are some zigzag, we have some zigzag folds here. And then we can overlap this thicker sleeve on over the arm and then draw in the cuff. So if I want to make this look a little bit more puffy, I'm not going to add too many folds. I'm going to make this look light by adding lighter and more condensed folds. But still make sure that they are wrapping around the cylinder. So that makes them look more puffy rather than super dense like denim, for example. Here's another border. And then here we have extra folds that drape downward. And because this is scrunched, you want to add some zigzag folds because it's bending. And here we have its hand, which we don't have to detail too much. But that is a nice little jacket here. And then here we have his undershirt, and we have his shirt that drapes over his pants. You can't really see it in the photo, but it probably goes maybe a little bit above his waistline. So that is his shirt underneath. We can color this if you want, but just to show you that we have a shirt underneath, let's add some folds. Just some nice zigzag folds that kind of float down. So that is the top. And then for the bottom, we have, let's give him some jeans, shall we? So when it comes to jeans, if you want to look up some reference for that, go ahead. But usually there is a nice button. And then here we have some tight folds that are usually condensed around the crotch area. And if you look at the image itself, it's quite skin tight on him. So we have a seam line usually for jeans around the sides. And then we have a kind of bit of a cuff that spreads outward a little bit because it's not super tight that it's like skin tight, but it's tight enough that it surrounds the body pretty well and fits it snug. And here, same thing. We add a seam line down the middle, and then add half lock. And we have a half lock fold down here because it's bending the knee. If you want to draw some ripped jeans, go ahead. You can just draw some spaces and then draw some little tears on the outside. So that here we have a guy with some sneakers as well. So we have the tongue of the sneaker, and then here we have the sole of the sneaker. I'm going to just shade that in black. Sole, sneaker, shaded black if you want to. So here we have your first guy. Pretty nice. So then let's go on with the second one, which is a lot more in action. I'll go a little bit quicker this time since I am running a little bit out of time, but I still want to just go over it nice with you guys. So I still want to make sure it's informative. So here, let's go a little bit quicker this time. Here we have our head facing this way. So drawing cross lines help. We have our neck down. His shoulders are a little bit droopier, so you can kind of draw a little action line that shows he's kind of dropping his arms. You can see a little bit of his clavicle. You can see a little bit downward. Here's his pec, or where his chest goes. And then here we have his bent, actually it's more straight. We have his more straight downward look. And then his pelvis is sort of leaning back as well. Here we have his arms. And here we have the football. So sometimes it can just be as rough as that, and pretty much you're good to go with refining it. But since I am going over this step by step, I like to go rough and then I like to refine later. So when it comes to the legs, which one is the weighted leg? This one that's bending right on the ground is the weighted leg. So we have our knee, then we have our lower knee, lower leg, and then we have our foot on the side view. He's landing straight on his feet here. And then this one goes back in space. So we're going to make this more straight down. And then bend it back. And then here we have his other foot. So just by building a skeletal base like this, makes it a lot more easier to plan out your drawing. Oops. So I'm going to erase. And I'm going to refine now. Here we have his head chiseled, make it a little bit chiseled by protruding out the cheekbones and the eyebrow ridge, and then sharpening his jawbone or jawline. If you want to add hair, go ahead. If you want to add a nose, you can go ahead too. For now, I'm just going to leave it blank because I'm only focusing on the clothes here and the pose. So for the first part, we want to draw in his neck, which is quite thick. It's going back into space. Here we have our sternocleidomastoid. And then we can have our tank top right over our guy here. So if you want, you can block out the arm by drawing a big either cylinder or a box or a rectangle even. I like to do cylinders, half boxes, just because it's just easier for me to visualize. So here we have our hand. Here we have our other hand, which is going more inward and then going outward here. And that can be good base to start off with. So his chest kind of goes out because his pecs are more bulging out. So what you want to do is you want to bulge out his pecs a little bit. And then draw the tight clothing into the body. So his jersey looks quite thick. I don't know if it's called a jersey. His tank top, I'll just say. His tank top is quite thick. Not thick. It's quite tight. So you can see more like straight folds kind of wrapping around his body. Here we have his deltoid, which is his big arm muscle up here. Halfway here on the back is his triceps. Here in front is his bicep. Here is his brachialis, which is the middle part where it's in between the bicep and the tricep. And then his brachioradialis, which is towards the thumb. Here's the palm. Here is his fingers. And here's a sliver of his back, you can see. So here we have the deltoid once again, going on the other side. I'm going to shade it in because it's in shadow. His bicep, his elbow, forearm. So once you get all this basic shapes in, it's a lot easier to block these shapes and hands and muscles in. So basic shapes are important. So here we have the ball that he's holding. And that is the top half of his body. Now let's go to the lower half. Let me zoom out so we can see. Here his jersey, or his not jersey, his tank top is going below his pelvis. It's kind of draping over his shorts. If you want, you can add some shape to his legs rather than just a skeleton. You can make it more of like a box or a cylinder, whichever. Cylinder is more effective when you can see the the different sides. So here is, I can see the underside of his other leg here, this one here, and I can see his calf sticking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a bump and then end that like so. So it looks like a bit like a cylinder, but it's a leg. Now I'm going to draw the shorts, which are quite easy. You just want to wrap the cloth around like a cylinder, because most of our arms and legs are like cylinders, right? I'm going to shade in the ball here so I can tell that this is a ball that he's holding. If you want, you can also draw in his muscles. Here we have his the ball that kind of connects the muscles together. That's where his sartorius is. And then here we have his medialis. Here we have his patella, which is his kneecap. And then here we have his calf muscle. And then a little bit of his shin muscles up over that covers the shin. I don't exactly know the whole name of it, but just to know that here the calf is at the back. And then here are some muscles that kind of cross over on top. Same thing on this side. Here we can see his bicep femoris, which is his main calf, overlapping on top. Here's a sartorius. Yeah, here's sartorius on the inside. Here's the patella, which can be kind of bunched up a little bit. And then here we have his calf. And the rest is history. So, socks are like cloth wrapped around a cylinder. Here we have the main foot. Here I have the sole. And here we have the little ribbon. You don't have to detail it too much, but just enough that it looks like a sneaker. Same thing on the other side, his sock, sole of his feet, and then the top, and then the tip. And that is the second pose, which we went a little bit quicker this time, but that's because I spent a little bit too long on the first one. But it's pretty easy because a lot of it is just wrapping around forms. So now let's finally go with our sitting pose, which will be quite fun. These are just kind of common, more like suave poses, of course. Once again, feel free to choose your own pose. So I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller as well, so I can fit the screen. Because it's smaller, I can kind of squish it a little bit. So here we have the head, and it's facing towards you. And it's facing a little bit up because it's kind of looking down at you a little bit. Here we have his neck, his trapezius and his collarbone kind of facing, he's kind of hunching over a little bit. You can see his shoulders raised, so that's how you can tell. If you want, you can also block in the shape of his, just block in the shape of where his body is twisting. So it looks like it's kind of bending, and then from here we can see the pelvis downward. So we can see what's kind of between his crotch, right? And that's how you can tell that his pelvis is facing up. It's facing towards you. So the box, if I were to draw it as a box, I'm going to draw it like this. So it looks more like that. You can see the underside of his crotch where it bends and goes back into his butt cheeks, right? Psh, that's inappropriate. His glutes. I should not have said that. Anyways, so you can see that going downward into space. Here we have a cylinder facing towards us, so that will be thicker on the back and thinner on the front. Here's the other leg, which you can just simply draw out the side of. His leg looks like it's a little bit lax, so I'm going to just drape that in, not straight, but towards us. So if I want to draw some action lines, I could do this, just to show where it's going. And his foot is flat facing us. That's what it looks like. His other leg, draw it like a hinge. So here's his other leg, and because it's farther in space, it's not in the same length here. So it's a little bit smaller, but it's obviously on the floor, it's in perspective, so that's why it's farther away here. So here's his patella, where it's going, and that's his leg. If you want to draw the chair as well, be my guest. I should have drawn the chair first, but here's the chair. Here is the bottom of the seat. Here is the arms here. So make sure that your chair is also in perspective, that the guidelines here are facing towards the same direction. So this way, you know, they look like they're in the same space. His arm will go across and bend down. Same with his other arm. So once we have the base, we can go ahead and draw or erase first and then draw in his features. So usually in my other courses, I would draw multiple types of poses, like multiple sitting poses, multiple standing poses, and multiple dynamic poses. But because I want to condense this, I'm just taking it, drawing one of each instead. So if you want, you can draw in the head. You can also draw in the hair that overlaps over the scalp, not sticking to the scalp. We just learned that earlier. Here we have the nose and the eye line. Here we have his neck. Here we have his collar, which sort of is like a little triangle, and it kind of is a little bit open towards his chest area here. So you want to just draw the triangles over his body. So it looks like a bit of flap. It kind of looks like a flap there. So let me go ahead and zoom in. Let's draw his undershirt first. So here we have his arm. And let's draw the chair. Don't forget that. So let's draw the chair here, just as a placeholder. Here we have a lot of zigzag folds here because it's a very kind of crinkly type of clothing. And especially when he's bending, you can see a lot of folds kind of, creasing in. So that folds are kind of a good way to show motion. So you can see that there's a lot of crease in here. And a good example of where to find these kind of poses, or a good example to show how folds work is by getting a pillow and then squishing it. So it kind of looks like this. Every time there's a fold in the form, there's a lot of folds in this creased area here. So just think of that as this. Remember to wrap around the arm here. So here we have some spiral folds that kind of wrap around his arm in a cylindrical way. And then here we have the elbow. And every time as I continue refining, I am changing and fixing areas here. Elbow, forearm. Make sure it's thick to thin. Here we have the buttons. We have his pants that go a little bit high above his waist. And here we have his suspenders that travel downward across his chest. That's what it looks like so far. And then here we have his forearm kind of resting on his leg here. So kind of treat that as like a cylinder that's facing in front of you or facing towards you because you're kind of seeing it coming closer to you. And then here we have his hand, his thumb, and then his hand. So far so good. Let's zoom out and let's focus on his legs here. So of course when we draw our chair, we want to make sure that he's actually sitting on it. So here we have the 3-finger gap here, and then his leg kind of comes out. You can see a little bit of his glutes kind of pressing in on the chair here, so we want to flatten that part. And then we draw in the leg here. So it's really just redefining and fixing up our mistakes from earlier, if you had any. So a lot of it you're using the underlay drawing to fix, but mostly it's a lot easier once you get the proportions right. So here we have some nice zigzag poses. And then we want to cover that over on top of the bottom leg here. So notice that there's a cylindrical opening down here that shows a bit of the leg down here. That shows that's not super tight, but it's tight enough. Here's the other leg. Half lock fold, and then seam line, and then a nice opening. You can just block in the pose of the foot here if you want. Same thing here. If you want to add like a tight leather kind of look, whoops. If you want to add a tight leather look, what you can do is you can make the shoes more pointy, and then make the folds rounded at the tip, just to show that, you know, this is more like a shinier leather shoe. And then we have these sticks here, little legs. We don't have to draw them too much, just to show that where he's actually sitting is not air. It's not on air. So I'm just gonna go with that for now. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully that this was understandable how to do poses with clothes on, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.